those people that has an allergic reaction to a podium, so I have to stay right here. It is so good to see you. It's so great to be in person, and I know we're moving really fast through the agenda. Thank you, Clau, for being our feeder and convener, and of course, Young Brands for. But I'm gonna dive into, guess what? More data. But in this case, beyond reporting the what is happening, which you already saw, we're gonna double click into the why of certain dimensions about the mindset and how the workforce expectations of our community have shifted. Because if that is where all the growth is coming from, we better get this right. And it's not a one size fits all. Now, for those of you that know me, I am a big advocate and proudly a leader with our company in what we call cultural intelligence. And cultural intelligence is not just a clever phrase, it's this mindset where all of us, and when I say all of us, it's every leader that really wants to win, wants to be aware of, understand, and apply cultural competence and inclusive data into their everyday business. And in case, shameless plug, you want to kind of see how I talk about this cultural intelligence, last year a lot of my clients actually got quite nervous with the TED Talk called Diversity is Overrated. Watch it and you'll see why. So for those of you that have diversity in your titles, please watch it first before you attack the messenger. I see my friend Jesse over there. He's like, huh, what are you doing, Lili? Anyway, why am I framing it with that? Because we need cultural intelligence into the way we show up, as Claudia was saying, with a big, proud megaphone of numbers, so that it is beyond the COVID narrative or the fact that companies kind of jumped in to take a stance or react to new litigations or shareholder pressures or ESG reports they have to put out. The headlines are out there. Many outlets are questioning, are brands really engaged with this? Are they really putting out objectives that matter and are lasting and sustainable, or is it just, as Harvard Business Review calls it, compliance theater? Well, we want to go beyond compliance theater because the dynamics have shifted so much. We know about the Great Resignation, right? It's kind of funny right now, we're seeing boomerang employees, so there's people now regretting the resignation. But it's a reality, and those pressures and those jobs that we just saw, for example, in the DFW area, scream opportunity, but also scream new strategies of cultural intelligence for talent engagement. Now, if so many people have quit, but there is obviously growth and the economic need to fill those jobs, as we just saw, how could we fill those gaps? So I'm going to go through this real quick because I know time is ticking. I'm going to try to get us back on time. But there were 3 trends before COVID, or as I call them, BC, that were already pointing to the fact that we needed cultural intelligence in our workforce and talent engagement. We're not just reacting to COVID. We're not just scrambling because of the Great Resignation. You had to be asleep at the wheel if you hadn't seen what we already saw and confirmed with the powerful folks from the census and our chamber, basically pointing to the fact that 100% of our population growth is coming from diverse segments, and we are more than 50% of that. Any Wall Street analyst, and we had, Mr. Gibbs tell us here, I got to run, I have earnings calls tomorrow. Everyone is trying to hear from CEOs, what are your levers for growth? What are you betting into for growth? And if it's not the portion of population, consumers, or talent that are driving all the growth, then you're betting on a shrinking market, and that makes no sense. Now, this was already happening before COVID, and this was also happening when we look back into time, to like the decade prior to this point in time, we were already contributing to 82% of the growth in the US labor force. Now, what about when you look forward? Well, the Department of Labor is showing that yet again, Hispanics continue to represent that cohort, that segment of the labor force that will continue to drive a crazy big number of 78% of net new workers between now and 2030. When the overall labor force growth rate is barely at a 4.5%. So you can look at us as, yes, we gotta catch up, or this is an altruistic mission, or as part of my CSR efforts. I'm sorry, this is about competitiveness because there's no other way to have a pipeline unless you tap into these numbers. So what about senior positions? And I know many of you in this room, I saw my friend Victoria somewhere around, you are on a mission to help us fix this number. Everywhere I can, I am throwing in the names of Latinos that are ready for board positions. Because if we are not at those senior executive levels where decisions are being made and barely represent 4% when we're 20 of the population, there's a big gap, but I like to think of this as opportunity. Glass half full person, I like to see that. So, okay, so what does this mean? When it comes to talent and competitiveness for our nation, and you've heard it over and over again already, it is mathematically impossible for any company, any of you in this room, to achieve your full potential in growth, impact, competitiveness, shareholder value without us being in the mix. It just doesn't work. I'll stand in front of any CFO or PhD in economics, and there's just no way around it. The numbers don't work. And when I see our census friend nodding, I'm like, okay, good, we're on the right track, right? Thank you. Now, there is a talent gap, we know that, but there's talent economics that we can tap into. I don't want to think of us as, again, the victims, but the victors that can show up and bring the pipeline that everybody needs. Now, there's no pipeline without inclusivity, and that's why we all need to understand, how do I promote this inclusivity? Because in the era of great resignation, companies are realizing we gotta switch that to understanding that there needs to be a great onboarding. Because yes, people are coming back. There are regrets of leaving the jobs, and there's so many, I think the last number I saw was about 11 million jobs that are still open with no candidates to fill them up in different industries nationwide. Well, then we gotta figure out, how do you attract people and how do you onboard them in different ways? And this is where data comes in. So our work in cultural intelligence is quite fascinating, because I feel like we have a crystal ball in our office. By the way, we're one of those companies that proudly moved from New York to the Dallas area. And I brought my family with 2 kids, yes. So I guess part of that 1.9 million, I'll claim the Valletta somewhere in there. And we certainly brought like 4 new Latinos to South Lake that needs a lot more of us there. So anyway, how are these expectations shifting? Now, the way we do research, and I can say proudly, and probably as the one and only Latina-run company doing AI-powered research like this, we scrape everywhere in the World Wide Web where anyone is volunteering a comment or a discussion about everything and anything. And without having to ask them a question, using AI, natural language processing, text analytics, and a stack of tools that we've been perfecting in the last few years, we can look at the patterns in the way people speak when nobody's asking them. And this is not social listening, by the way. This is everywhere worldwide, where you and I volunteer comments and they are open source. So we're not breaking any privacy or anything like that. And then when you look at the aggregation of those patterns, voices, millions and millions of data points, where even people self-identify as Hispanic in the comments, we can look at insight, cultural intelligence, sentiment drivers, decision journeys, so that we get to decode how people feel and what is motivating them to take action without having to ask them a question. Now, there are 2 reports, and I actually did ask Claudia's team to make sure that we give you a 1-pager that you can take. A lot of this data we do for the benefit of the world. During COVID, we did it for vaccinations. During COVID, we did it for how parents felt about going back to school. We've shared this with the CDC, with the White House, anyone that would listen, so we empower you with cultural intelligence. So we have 2 reports, and I'll just give you a quick sneak peek. There's many more pages behind it. One was done in partnership with our friends from High Tech, specifically about the mind shifts of Hispanics in technology, which is very important, as we saw. Business services, professional services, and tech. And then overall mindsets towards the workplace. So I'm gonna give you just some highlights. You see how big the data points are? We're talking about an in-value universe of 28.4 million digital discussions, of which 1.8 million were Hispanic. So when we talk about big data, it's big. So what did we learn about expectations about the workplace? Again, I'm giving you a sliver. I promise you want the full report. I'll make sure that our Hispanic Star team has it so we can share it. There are things that range all the way from organizational motivations to the workplace, all the way to personal things like work-life balance, I want growth and opportunity, all the way to hard things like my compensation and a competitive pay and benefits is going to be critical. So these were the types of themes that 1.8 million digital discussions of Hispanics talking about their satisfaction with work reveal. Now, how do these differ across segments? Here's a very interesting slide. So let me help you out. The yellow, it's overall population, just everybody talking about the workplace. Then we have Hispanic and Black. And let me just call out some highlights right there. Look how much higher of a driver satisfaction is a supportive or a supporting culture. So any of you that are ERG or BRG leaders know that you are a key lever for engagement and satisfaction, more so than for any other segment. And look how much more important compensation is as well, because many of us are multi-generational households. We probably picked up a few extra relatives in the season of COVID that were helping out, right? And look how much less, surprisingly enough, the work-life balance benefits are. So top three, comp, opportunity and growth, and a supporting culture definitely is a key motivation. All right, let me move really fast. How about tech? I'm just gonna close with this one. Why did I call out the tech sector? Because we know it's critically competitive for our country. We are barely 3 to 4% of professionals in the tech sector nationwide, even though we represent about 12% of STEM graduates. So don't tell me it's a pipeline dilemma. It's just you may not be fishing in the right pond for finding our kids that are graduating. Anyway, this is what we've seen before, during, and after COVID. This was done in partnership with high tech. And all of a sudden, yes, it was very negative before. It dipped a little bit in 2020 because companies were supportive. And now it went back up to being quite negative. Why? Very similar, personal barriers, structural barriers. But let me get to this really key slide. The top driver, once again, is compensation as a positive thing. So if there was ever a time to be competitive and not be shortcutting those offers to your Hispanic professionals, there it is. And then the big driver or barrier that is getting in the way is not seeing a path to growth. So from the get-go, that personal growth career map, it's gonna be quite important to retain us. And by the way, flashing news, what is it that matters to our community anyway? I don't want to get political here, but many times when you turn on the TV, it sounds like if we only cared about one issue. It is inflation, jobs, and the economy. And yes, our communities are concerned about crime, but there's a lot of other things that are ranking 4, 5, 6 that, yes, are important for society and maybe our ESG metrics, but it's not the kitchen table issues that our families care about. So we got to let the data do the talking and really align to that. All right, so there are many other barriers to entering in this tech sector. I wanted to show you this because it made me so excited. We may assume that it's things about, people don't feel that they're ready, or maybe there's a confidence issue. This was fascinating because the top barrier for everyone else, according to, again, 647,000 data points, is that they just don't know about the interview and they need to get in. We are saying that is a hiring bias. So even when you get in, you're like, oh, they're already judging me differently. But look at the other things. I don't have an inside scoop, somebody that can mentor me and show me the way ahead of time, or this place just seems unwelcoming. And as you can see, the top areas are different by segment. It's not a one size fits all, hence why you need cultural intelligence in the way you look at your data and create strategies and interventions to address that, because this bias and unwelcoming workplace definitely rank much higher. So let's land this plane. I want us all to recognize that whether it is talent, consumer growth, shareholder value, whatever it is you're driving in your company, there is no path to growth without inclusivity or cultural intelligence, which I want us to remember it and codify it as not ROI from business school, but return on inclusion. And the fact that not doing it will give you a return on ignored, and that's pretty dumb. So now you have enough numbers to not do that. So don't forget, it's a mindset. It's not a program. It's not a charity initiative. It's your growth driver. And when you're empowered by the numbers, as Claudia just challenges to do, we show up differently. We sound differently, and all of a sudden the case for action is one of prosperity, of growth, of competitiveness that can only be fueled to its full potential with us in the mix. Thank you.